The other soldiers do not understand why you carry your own pack. A man of your family's standing could easily afford servants to carry it for him, could march at the rear with the officers, could claim every comfort his position would reasonably allow. You are Cato. Years before Caesar, years before the Civil War, years before Utica, you are simply a young military tribune serving in the legions, and tonight, exhausted from a full day's march, you are choosing deliberately to sleep on the same hard ground as the common soldiers around you rather than retreat to the more comfortable quarters your rank would easily justify. Feel the strangeness of this choice as your fellow officers see it, a wealthy, well-connected young Roman voluntarily embracing hardship that no one would actually require of him, no law, no military regulation, nothing except some internal conviction that apparently matters more to you than comfort itself. You have heard the quiet mockery already. Officers who assume you are simply performing virtue for political advantage, building a reputation among common soldiers that might someday prove useful for your future political career. You understand why they assume this, since Roman political life is genuinely full of exactly this kind of calculated performance, ambitious men cultivating popularity through carefully staged humility designed entirely for eventual political return. You let them believe whatever they prefer to believe because explaining your actual reasoning to men who have already decided your motivation feels considerably less important than simply continuing the practice itself. Regardless of how it happens to be interpreted by skeptical observers around you, Epictetus, not yet born, would one day teach that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. You think of this principle now, though you do not yet have his exact words, recognizing instinctively that your own family's wealth and connections could easily provide you considerable comfort throughout this military campaign. Comfort? You are deliberately choosing to forego not from any external requirement, but from genuine internal conviction regarding what kind of man you actually want to become. You eat the same simple rations the common soldiers eat, rather than the more elaborate food your position could easily arrange. You march the same considerable distances they march, carrying the same substantial weight, rather than riding comfortably while they walk beneath their own heavy burden. You do this deliberately, consistently, day after exhausting day, not as some temporary performance designed to impress a particular audience, but as ongoing, genuine practice training your own body and your own mind to remain genuinely unattached to comfort, regardless of how easily that comfort remains available to you. A veteran soldier approaches you one evening, an older man who has served considerably longer than you have lived, and he asks you directly, without the careful diplomatic phrasing officers typically use when addressing someone of your family's standing, why you actually do this. You consider his question seriously, recognizing that his genuine curiosity deserves an honest answer rather than some carefully calculated political response. You tell him that you believe a man who has never experienced hardship cannot genuinely understand what hardship actually requires. That comfortable, sheltered virtue remains untested virtue, theoretical rather than genuinely demonstrated through actual lived practice. You tell him that you want your own eventual judgment, your own future decisions, to be informed by genuine understanding of what ordinary soldiers actually experience, rather than abstract theory developed entirely from comfortable distance. He studies your face for a long moment, clearly searching for the calculated political ambition he likely expects to find behind your stated reasoning. He finds something else instead, genuine conviction, and something shifts slightly in his own expression, respect replacing his earlier skepticism, though you sense he remains genuinely uncertain whether your particular choice represents wisdom or simply unusual eccentricity from an otherwise privileged young Roman. Marcus Aurelius would write, generations after this particular evening, that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You think of this principle now, recognizing that your own deliberate hardship represents exactly this kind of practice, training your mind to remain genuinely steady regardless of external circumstance, building internal strength through consistent, voluntary discomfort rather than waiting passively for involuntary hardship to eventually test you whether you happen to be prepared for it or not. You think about other young Roman officers serving alongside you, men who have chosen the considerably easier path your own family connections would equally permit you: comfortable quarters, elaborate meals, servants handling whatever physical burden the campaign might otherwise require. You do not judge them harshly for this choice, recognizing honestly that most reasonable people, given genuine opportunity for comfort, will naturally choose it over voluntary hardship. But you also recognize, examining your own daily practice honestly, exactly why you have chosen something different for yourself specifically. You suspect with considerable confidence, based on observing Rome's political culture across your own relatively young life already, that your future will eventually require genuine strength, difficult decisions made under genuine pressure, situations where comfortable habits and untested character will prove genuinely inadequate to whatever circumstances eventually arrive. You are preparing for that uncertain future now deliberately, through daily practice rather than theoretical conviction alone. The march continues for many more days, and you maintain your chosen discipline throughout: the simple food, the shared physical burden, the hard ground each night, rather than more comfortable alternatives readily available to you. Something gradually shifts among the common soldiers around you, you notice, watching their behavior carefully across these accumulating weeks. Their initial skepticism slowly transforms into something resembling genuine respect, not because you have performed any single dramatic act of courage, but because your consistency itself has become its own form of evidence. Proof that your stated convictions actually match your genuine daily conduct, rather than existing merely as comfortable rhetoric you maintain only when convenient. Epictetus would teach that we must distinguish carefully between what belongs to us and what does not, and that genuine freedom exists entirely within that crucial distinction. You think of this principle now, recognizing that your own daily choices throughout this military campaign represent exactly this kind of practiced freedom, deliberately choosing discomfort that remains entirely within your own control, rather than simply waiting passively for circumstances to eventually impose discomfort upon you without your own genuine consent or preparation. This distinction matters considerably more than it might initially appear. You reflect one particularly difficult evening, your body genuinely exhausted from the day's demanding march. A man who only experiences hardship when circumstances force it upon him remains, in some genuine sense, a victim of those circumstances, reacting rather than genuinely choosing. A man who deliberately chooses hardship, even when comfortable alternatives remain readily available, discovers something considerably more valuable: genuine evidence that his own character does not actually depend on external comfort that he retains regardless of circumstance. Genuine capacity to endure difficulty through his own internal strength rather than merely external good fortune. You think of Socrates, centuries before you, famously indifferent to material comfort, despite living within a society that genuinely valued such comfort considerably. You understand him now, through your own daily practice, in a way you only theoretically understood him during your earlier years of comfortable philosophical study before this particular military campaign actually began. The campaign eventually concludes, and you return to Rome considerably changed from the young man who originally departed it. Your fellow officers, you notice, regard you somewhat differently now, the earlier mockery largely replaced by genuine, if still somewhat puzzled, respect. You do not particularly need their approval. You recognize honestly, examining your own settled internal state following the campaign's conclusion. But you also recognize something valuable in their shifted perception, evidence that consistent demonstrated character eventually proves itself through accumulated practice rather than through any single dramatic, isolated gesture. You think of every future political confrontation that genuinely difficult years ahead will eventually require from you. Confrontations with Caesar, confrontations regarding Rome's gradual institutional decline. Eventual decisions regarding your own life and death that this particular military campaign could never have specifically predicted. You recognize, reflecting honestly on this connection, that tonight's deliberate hardship and countless similar choices made throughout this demanding campaign represent genuine preparation for exactly those future difficulties, training ground for the unwavering character your later, more famous confrontations would eventually require from you. Freedom, you understand now considerably more completely than you did before this campaign began, is never actually a single dramatic choice made once and then permanently completed. It is instead a daily practice, repeated choice after repeated choice, gradually building genuine internal strength capable of eventually withstanding whatever significant test life eventually decides to bring before you. If you are listening to this and currently wondering how genuine inner strength actually develops, whether through some single dramatic moment or through something considerably more gradual and consistent, know that Cato built his own legendary unwavering character through exactly this kind of patient daily practice long before any of his more famous confrontations ever actually arrived. This is why Severus Stoic exists, to bring you these formative, often overlooked chapters of Stoic history, demonstrating that genuine strength is built gradually through consistent daily choice, rather than appearing instantly during some single, isolated, dramatic moment. If this story reached something true in you, subscribe to Severus Stoic, so more of these journeys continue finding their way to you, exactly when you need them most. Leave a comment below and tell me about a daily practice you have chosen for yourself, something genuinely difficult that you maintain consistently because you believe it builds character you will eventually need for circumstances you cannot yet fully predict. Your comments help this channel grow, and they help other people recognize the genuine value contained within consistent daily discipline, rather than waiting passively for dramatic circumstances to eventually force growth upon them. Cato built his legendary, unwavering freedom through countless small daily choices long before history ever remembered his more famous final confrontation. Remember this the next time you wonder whether your own daily discipline genuinely matters. You cannot always predict which future moment will eventually test your character most severely. You can always control whether today's daily practice genuinely prepares you for whenever that moment finally arrives.